Former Chief Medical Officer Dr. Patrick Martin believes tourists traveling to the Federation when the borders reopen on October 31st and are coming from outside the CARICOM bubble should be required to have a negative PCR test 3 days before the travel date. Speaking on SK Newsline's sister radio station Voice of the Caribbean Radio on Let's Talk St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Martin said this negative PCR test must be uploaded electronically by the travelers 3 days prior to traveling to St. Kitts and Nevis. And when they arrive in the Federation, they should be tested again to verify whether or not they have the coronavirus.
In some places like Taiwan, Iceland, etc., an incoming traveler has to upload a negative PCR 3 days prior to travel. And in some countries, there's another PCR done at the airport. And you stay put at the airport until the result comes back. That, to my mind, is the ultimate in best practices. If they have a negative PCR, they get on the plane. When they get to the airport, if you have a negative PCR, you go free.
And how quickly will those results be?
Some PCRs come back in a matter of hours, several hours, 4, 6 hours.
But is that practical though? I mean, with airlines on schedules?
It's practical if you do it. It's practical if you're doing it in phases. So if you're doing it in phases, you're starting off with small numbers.
Chief Medical Officer Dr. Hazel Laws explained at last week's press conference of the Prime Minister that tourists from countries within the CARICOM bubble announced recently would not be required to quarantine once they travel with a negative PCR test.
Inbound travelers will be confined to their accommodation site with access to an approved package of services in a bubble, all right, for the first 7 days of their stay or less, because we are told that persons coming in from our source markets, they remain here on an average of about 4 to 5 days. And so once you come in, you remain in the confinement of the hotel or the accommodation, and you will be allowed to partake and access a pre-approved package of services within that hotel setting.
Dr. Martin said St. Kitts and Nevis should look at best practices of other countries.
St. Lucia has been open for several months, 20-something cases, no deaths, no active cases over the past week, according to their reporting to WHO. Barbados had 8 over the past week. That's the week leading up to October 5. Barbados had 8, Dominica 7, Antigua 6. But it appears as though those cases were captured at the airport.
Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris had announced last week that efforts are being made to have sections of the RLB International Airport retrofitted to accommodate the new protocols being outlined by the government to minimize the transmission of the novel coronavirus. Andre Huey, SKN Newsline.